All right. We have discussed the subject of physical abuse and trying to make that non-productive during a capture phase. There's another form of abuse that I think is at least on everybody's minds, even though the likelihood of it occurring are very small, and that's sexual abuse. Assault on the field, assault during a trip, rape, and things like that. More specifically, I'd like to even address this idea of in captivity, if as a hostage or during a bank robbery where I'm not free to run away or call the police, how do I minimize the chances of sexual assault? And there's some good evidence out there and some good information I think we can give you that would encourage you. I want to keep it in perspective. I think the movies would say that there has to be some form of sexual assault in every incident because maybe that sells movies or something. The reality is, for Western women, for citizens of major nations, and during non-wartime events, sexual assault is fairly minimal. I mean, it only takes one to be a maximum, horrendous thing, but it does not occur very often. In the cases that it has occurred, the vast majority of the time when that's going on, it's a target of opportunity. It's not a condoned thing. It's a guard who decides he can get away with something. He's looking both ways to make sure the boss doesn't see him. It's probably against the ethics or the ethos or the morals of the group even holding. He's doing it because it's a power thing. He thinks he can get away with it. He wants to intimidate, or he's on his own motivation at that point. Okay? That's also the easiest kind to stop. And so that's the part we want to address. And again, we are not talking about street assault. All the good evidence would still say that I'm walking down the street and a guy jumps out of the alley and attempts a sexual assault in the U.S., anywhere where I've got some access to law enforcement in a fairly rapid manner. The best thing a lady can do is just fight back. That kicking, screaming, hollering has been a great deterrent in a street assault, but we're not there now. Now I'm being held by a guy who, even if I fight back, he's the one who feeds me. And he's the one I have to rely on, so I may win the battle and lose the war thing. So this is a different situation. We want to talk about minimizing that, and I'll give you I'll teach it really by some examples of some godly women and some things that God has done, given some ideas that really worked well. And I'll start with Monique Stridham, sweet lady, a Christian lady from South Africa, held in Malaysia. She and her husband were vacationing at a hotel when the Abu Sayyaf guys, pirates, kind of sweep ashore and just grab up all the tourists they can get and haul them off in boats. Now we're a few minutes later, an hour later, we're out in the ocean. Her husband's laying there beside her. We're in capture shock. Nobody really knows what to do. There's machine guns. There are people threatening to kill. This group has killed people. It's a pretty risky situation. One of the guards literally looks both ways to make sure his co-workers, if that's what you want to call them, aren't paying attention, don't see, and then he moves in on Mrs. Stridham and begins to touch her inappropriately, just to see if if she's cowed enough to allow him to do it. Maybe it's a part of his, I'll get control, or just to see, he thought he had an opportunity while this lady's too frightened to fight back. And her husband doesn't know what to do, and there's this dilemma, do I get up and get shot? How do I prevent this from happening to my wife without physically intervening? And how do I physically intervene when there's 6 of them with machine guns? I mean, if I could physically fight back, I wouldn't even be a prisoner. We'd have done something else. She took care of the problem. God put the idea in her head, she says. She moved over to the side of the boat without asking, just crawled over to the side, all of a sudden like she was seasick, and began to fake throwing up over the side of the boat. Made some horrible sounds. And as a father, the whole baby diaper throwing up thing, man, it doesn't take much. And she got him, and she's changed his mind. She's no longer seen as a sexual target or an attractive target. She's seen as it's vomit and it's yuck, and she's totally acting through this thing. She wasn't seasick, but she changed his mind, and the guy literally finally kind of just threw his hands up in disgust and walked away, left her alone, just quit. I mean, that's a pretty miraculous and wise intervention. Husband didn't have to get up and take a bullet, which would not have stopped. I mean, if he's dead, that wouldn't have stopped it anyway. She didn't have to endure anymore. She put a stop to it. And I think the strategy we see there is she simply changed his mind. And so I want to keep that in mind. You think you're a powerless victim and you have to sit there and do what they tell you to do. She didn't say, stop, over my dead body, you can't do that, I'm an American, I've got rights. She didn't try any of that baloney. She just psychologically, I need to change this guy's mind. And so she did. I think other examples of changing their mind. Gracia Burnham, missionary held in the Philippines with her husband Martin. A lot of things happened there, but Gracia did a lot of things to help herself, and Martin did a lot of things as well, and we'll talk about those in the men's role here in a minute. But Gracia, from the moment of capture, immediately identified that her Muslim captors maybe saw her as a Western woman and saw her as somebody that was more available as a target. In fact, all the other women in that camp were sexually assaulted at some point, except Gracia. So what did Gracia do different? For one, she adopted the head covering thing quickly as a cultural symbol that I am a decent woman, and trying to cover up and not appear attractive in that sort of a way. And so she did everything she could to send cultural signals. That's not an option. Okay? She did a lot of other good things too, and she maintained a tremendous testimony throughout that thing to those folks. Speaking to her husband's side of it, and as I kind of shift into the guy's role on this, we know that a lady who's held with her husband probably does face a little bit less of this threat. At least there's the feeling of less threat when you have a husband or a male companion there.
In this video, Jim Spence talks about the difficulty of being in a situation where his wife was threatened with sexual assault.
There was no resistance. Once they came in the house with the gun, we knew that we had no leverage to resist. It definitely wasn't. I mean, it was somewhat emasculating for me, obviously. They threatened to rape my wife right next to me, and I'm already tied up. We didn't resist at all.
Gracia Burnham, who was held in the Philippines for 13 months, talks to us about how she faced the possible threat of sexual assault. She talks about her situation and some of the preventive things she did. She also talks about her husband's critical role in helping to prevent any sexual assault.
From the very beginning, I had wanted to keep myself covered. When I first found out they were Muslims, I had shorts on, and I immediately asked God for proper clothes. And somebody threw a long malong skirt my way, and I used it. I always kept covered. I always kept my head covered. I look back on that, and I think the only thing that saved me, the Lord saved me from any sexual assault. But I think it's because Martin was such a nice guy. Everybody liked Martin. And I think I was safe because he was well liked, is the only thing I can attribute it to.
Martin Burnham was a tremendous example. Martin was willing to play the husband role. He was willing to reach out and say, hey, this is my wife, gentlemen, please. I know we're prisoners, but may I at least sit by my wife? May I at least, he kind of has permission morally to ask, because this is my wife. And so by being in proximity to her, he's already taken away some of the guy who might be thinking he has a chance. And he plays that role all the time. My wife, maybe she shouldn't be going off to the restroom by herself. Maybe, may I go along? May I? And then he extends it to the other ladies in the camp. Hey, there was having an issue with the ladies bathing in the river, and the guards maybe doing a little peeking and getting ideas, and you don't want the guards thinking that way. And so he says, hey, I'm the married man. I know as Muslims you have some moral standards, and he uses their common moral standards that wouldn't be right, and I'm married, so how about I play chaperone? And he would go to the river and stand with his back to the ladies and face into the jungle and sort of deter the peeping toms who are just getting ideas in their heads about things for later on. And so Martin kind of, that's the heroic part of when you can reach past yourself, and protecting your wife is huge. That's a step. But the fact that by the grace of God he was willing to even reach out and help the other ladies, who some of which didn't have husbands with them. Okay, so we know that having your husband there is great as a help if the husband's playing his role. But what if you don't have a husband, or he's not with you, he's not captured? We also know by transference that any man willing to play that cultural role of father, husband, brother, protector, family, can have that same effect to stop this stuff. So the man who says to the bad guys, and you don't have to lie and say, this is my blood sister or this is my real daughter, but to say, sir, she's like a sister to me. Please, that's not right. Please, this lady and I, we're on the same team. She's like a daughter to me. I mean, you're just morally, you're making it hard on a guy to continue to perpetrate stuff like that when you bring in the family connection. And I know one hostage who said to the guy, what would your mother think? Well, that's risky. Okay, it could be a little borderline on creating anger, but it worked in that one. And the guy, because that's just the opposite of this whole sexual assault mentality into the family thing. So I would say any guy, and if there's not a guy there, even two ladies together are stronger than one lady alone. Another guy, this is my sister. Perhaps could we go to the bathroom together? Perhaps we could go to the river together. Just not allowing myself to be taken off alone. And none of it done in the, I'm an American, I've got rights, you can't do that, that's not appropriate. That tone isn't going to go anywhere with a captor who wants to feel he's in charge. More like what the Burnhams used. Please, that's not appropriate. Can we do the right thing? Would you allow me? I'll take the burden. Those types of things. I mean, the leader of the group saw that as, okay, you're helping me keep my guys in line and you're taking care of your wife, which I understand. And it actually helped them humanize. The real dilemma, I think, for men in this issue is, how do I physically stop an assault if I'm already a prisoner? That's a huge dilemma, and particularly in our culture for guys, but for any other human being. As a lady, how would I help protect another lady? It's tough. And the idea of physically getting up and saying, over my dead body, are you going to touch her? Just doesn't have the same effect when we're already prisoners and they're thinking about dead bodies. And if I'm dead, I'm not protecting. If they shoot me, now she's alone, and there is nobody to take care of her tomorrow. I know one wife, a mission lady, who told her husband, don't you dare die and leave me alone with these people. I'll kill you. I mean, and she was able to use a little humor in that thing, but the whole point was, don't get up and play hero and prevent me. You stopped it today, but if you're not here tomorrow, who will stop it? That's not hero. That's, you got the easy way out, honey. Now I'm stuck. So there's a lot of thinking that has to go in to this stopping of assault thing. There's been some other ideas that God has brought to people's minds, strategies that did work. If the guy's not supposed to be doing it, calling attention to the fact that he's in there. Hey, are you supposed to be out here alone with me? I thought, your boss said not to do this. Bringing attention and noise to the situation. That's been a useful thing. Physically resisting in a passive, defensive way. It's completely different to stand up and tell the guy over my dead body than it is to take and put my arms around this lady and say, please, sir, she's like a sister to me. Please, you're going to have to pry my hands off of here. I'm not fighting you, but I'm not making this easy. Much harder psychologically on this guy, even if he's got mental issues. Much harder for him to stop that than if I give him the excuse of challenging his authority. So passive stuff. And then the ladies, taking this idea of throwing up a step further. We've had ladies use defecation and urination and feigning a cough or a disease or something that just suddenly makes them unattractive. We've had how I dress in the camp. Gracia putting that head covering on. How you dress. I look just fine for American and sitting on the airplane, but suddenly now I'm wearing a skirt that's, and here and in their culture even showing my hair. And so whatever, I just need to think through, what do I do to become unattractive, whether it is the coughing and those things. But I think there are just so many options short of sitting there and saying, well, if I'm a victim, I'm a victim. There's nothing I can do. It is indeed possible you may have to endure that. It's so rare that I wouldn't put a great deal of thought on, that's probably going to happen. There are just so many opportunities to put a stop to it by men and women talking through it together, husbands and wives, teammates, discussing with each other. What are we going to do to do that? Protocols. We had a young lady assaulted on a mission group here a few years ago in New Guinea. The protocol was no ladies walking by themselves, walk with somebody else. We had not had any assaults of 2 or more together. She decided for a moment there, whatever, I'm going to walk by myself, and bingo. So paying attention to those little details, it's not a, oh, you are overreacting, guys, I'll be fine. Sticking to some of those rules a team leader sets and paying attention to those protocols could just stop a lot of heartache. Because an incident like that just, I mean, that's a horrendous thing for the victim, and it's a horrendous thing for the friends and the team, and it puts a stop to what the Lord sent us there to do in the first place. So we pay attention, we stick together, and we help each other, and we reach out to each other. And we know that even a hostile hostage taker will start to see that noble act of you trying to help another person. That generally tends to build their respect even for you, as opposed to defiance. Martin Burnham developed a wonderful witness and relationship with those guys while taking care of his agenda. He didn't just do everything they told him. He took care of business in a way that left him actually a better relationship with them than if he had just rolled over and played dead. That's the encouraging part of this. Your odds are slim, and God has provided us a lot of tools to put a stop to it.
In this session, David has covered how to survive a hostage situation, as well as how to minimize sexual assault. David reminded you that sexual assault rarely happens in captivity, but you should always be prepared. It is unlikely that you will ever face one of these situations, but with the world growing more and more volatile every day, it is important to know the facts and to think over what you would do in these circumstances. Take time as a group to talk over the things that David has covered. Pray as a team that God would prepare you for whatever you may face. Remember, you are not alone.